Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, and we're talking about Bruckner. Yeah, the 5 worst Bruckner conductors in the universe. Believe you me, they really suck. They were the avatars of the Bruckner year. New Bruckner cycles coming out with everybody. Everybody was doing Bruckner. Everyone is still doing Bruckner. And the truth of the matter is most of these people have no business doing Bruckner. Bruckner is a tough composer to wrap your brain around. He needs certain special handling, a certain amount of insight, identification with the idiom. He's not the kind of composer that you just haul out and say, oh, today let's do Bruckner. No. It needs more consideration than that. Tovey, I think, actually had a very, Tovey, in case you don't know, Donald Francis Tovey is the great English music critic and writer on music and composer and all that stuff. Scholar, conductor, really a brilliant guy. And he actually put his finger exactly on why there's so much bad Bruckner. He said that on the whole, because he was writing around 1920s, he said a vogue for Mahler is much healthier for our musical climate than a vogue for Bruckner. And it turned out he was right. And the reason he just nailed, he said, because Mahler's mastery at form and orchestration and all of that stuff would discourage the cult of amateurishness, which Bruckner encourages. And Bruckner does encourage a cult of amateurishness. In other words, Mahler wrote such detailed scores that require such virtuosity to perform and which limit the amount of sheer perversity and stupidity that the conductors can impose on the music. Whereas Bruckner, on the other hand, was notoriously insecure. There are multiple editions of every symphony. The whole suggestion with Bruckner is that he didn't know what he was doing, didn't know what he wanted, and so conductors are free to do whatever they damn well please with the music. Of course, they're not. But this is the impression that Bruckner has given. And modern conductors have run with it in the worst possible way, whereas they just can't get away with it in Mahler. You can't. Mahler was smarter than they were, and they know that Mahler was smarter than they were. And so at least there's a little bit of humility. With Bruckner, there's none. Everybody thinks they know better than Bruckner did. And so they can fix the music however it needs to be fixed, which is just terrible. And so here we have, well, the 5 worst Bruckner conductors, and one special mention at the end. First, Valery Gergiev. He did it with the Munich Philharmonic or whatever it was in St. Florian. Oh, yes. St. Florian was the monastery where Bruckner was the organist for 10 minutes, and he's buried under the organ in the crypt. And playing Bruckner symphonies above his dead body is somehow supposed to be a more authentic and spiritually luminous experience. It's really grotesque when you think about it. I mean, Purcell and Handel are both buried in Westminster Abbey, but nobody goes running around to Westminster Abbey saying, oh, we have to only play their music there because that makes it better or more authentic somehow. It's a selling point. It's a gimmick. Well, it's a gimmick with Bruckner because there is no evidence whatsoever that he expected his symphonies to be played in a monastery or that he was writing them for that really echoey, swimmy, awful acoustic at St. Florian. Really not a good place to play Bruckner. And that his music benefits from being heard in a swimmy, echoey acoustic. Bruckner wrote music for normal concert halls in Vienna, for example, or wherever else it was played. And, the resonance, the echo effects, they're all built in. He doesn't need help. I mean, yeah, you don't want to play his music in a perfectly cold and sterile environment. It requires a certain warmth and a certain amount of echo in the sound after he cuts off with those famous climaxes that go nowhere. You want to hear the ringing and little bit. But that's just normal good acoustics for a modern concert hall. That has nothing to do with playing things. I mean, Bruckner's always done in churches. It just sounds horrible. You lose all the detail that he's so carefully touched into his scores. So Valery Gergiev thought, well, doing it all in St. Florian was going to be a big deal. That was going to, it's almost like period instrument people who expect the instruments to do the job for them, rather than actually having ideas, because Gergiev has no ideas. I mean, his one idea is to sort of take the finales quickly and excitingly, which he does, because Bruckner is famous for having finales that kind of disappoint in some cases. So he was determined to have like big climaxes at the end, no matter what, and they're quite exciting. But getting there is a slog. I mean, it's just mindless time beating. He's a noodler. In fact, he's worse than that. He's a knoodler. He's a noodler with a K in front. And the performances are completely unmemorable for that reason. Another loser, Christian Thielemann. Woo! Well, he made the Vienna Philharmonic sound crappy in Bruckner, and that's an achievement. It's really an achievement. I mean, they can do this with their, eyes closed. Actually, it sounded like they were playing with their eyes closed and their brains in neutral. Thielemann he did a good eighth with the Staatskapelle Dresden for Deutsche Grammophon, I think it was. He did. He can do it, except where he has ideas, which are almost invariably bad ones. And here on Sony, he was dreadfully recorded with this compacted, ugly sonority at the climaxes. It was really just a total waste of time, a true cocaine hippo, something that was done because it could be done, not because it should be done. Another similar cycle, actually, was Andris Nelsons. I mean, can you believe a bunch of people got together in a room and said to themselves, I'll bet the universe is just waiting for Andris Nelsons' Bruckner cycle. I mean, really. They're just lining up at the street corners at their local record emporia, or having their playlists, waitlisted and whatever for his next Bruckner, with the Gewandhaus of Leipzig, which of course is a great Bruckner orchestra, but which sounds like trash when he conducts them. It really is remarkable how boring these performances are, and how unidiomatic Andris Nelsons' approach is. I mean, he slows down when it should speed up. He speeds up when it should slow down. Again, the sound is very impacted. He doesn't have any feel for the texture and sonority of the music. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. Especially if you make A-B comparisons with these, the great Bruckner conductors who we talked about in the previous Bruckner conductor video. It's just, what a difference. But if we want to go the opposite to some of these people, you have to listen to Mario Venzago. Yes, on CPO, mostly with like chamber orchestras, like the Tapiola Sinfonietta doing the Fifth Symphony. Oh my God. He decided that Bruckner should be light and zippy and dance-like and fluffy, like an Aubert ballet pas de deux. That's Venzago. I mean, he was talking about, actually in his notes, believe it or not, the difference between Baroque non-vibrato strings and romantic non-vibrato strings. Like, there's a difference, I guess. His own notes were completely insane. The interpretations are as shallow and anti-Bruckner as it's possible to be. They're horrible in ways that it's almost impossible to describe. He is the satanic un-Celibidache. He really is. It's just an incredibly bizarre and wanton and stupid approach to the music. And the whole cycle is just dreadful. Oh my God, how anybody could come up with money and spend money to do it and waste the plastic on pressing this Bruckner cycle and trying to offer it to you for sale, I will never understand. It is completely and utterly abysmal. And after that highlight, what do we get next? Well, we have the anti-Celibidache. Then we've got the uber-Celibidache. That's Rémy Ballot. Ballot. How do you want to pronounce his last name? It's Ballot, if you do it in English. He's just a joke. He takes the slowness of Celibidache, multiplies it several times, gets a youth orchestra together, and then tortures the living daylights out of these poor kids. I feel so sorry for them. It's not just that they're a youth orchestra so that the playing isn't great. I mean, it's okay. They get through it. But it's that at these tempos, the music is not physically sustainable. I mean, the brass are just dying. It's ridiculous. He's on the Gramola label, which I always thought was granola. Sometimes I have a typo there. But in any case, he has gotten some acclaim, probably from the parents of the children in the youth orchestra who go to the concerts. And he also plays at St. Florian. So he gets the extra transcendental gimmick award. He's doing the same thing that Gergiev does. And I think it's probably a good rule that if the performance was recorded in a church or a monastery, then it's going to suck. You just know it's going to suck because the music is just so not suited for that kind of atmosphere, even at the tempos that Ballot chooses to conduct at. It's really, really bad. I mean, you can read some of the reviews on classicstoday.com, and there may be some samples there too. If you're an insider, wow, this is just a new standard of badness. But as Tovey pointed out, this is the kind of amateurishness that Bruckner's own insecurities have encouraged in the interpreters who came after him, and they have snapped it up like birds of prey looking for an easy carcass to pick at. They really have. However, we do have to conclude with an honorable mention, an honorable atrocity mention, and this is the Hansjörg Albrecht's complete transcriptions of all the Bruckner orchestral works. I mean, it's everything he did. I mean, it's incredible for organ solo. Now, Bruckner, of course, was an organist. Everybody knows that. He played the organ at St. Florian, among other places. One of the great organ improvisers and organ players of his time. Everybody agrees. He wrote virtually no organ music. He regarded it as an instrument that was suitable only for improvisation. And his symphonies, people say, are just imbued with the sound of the organ loft because they use terrace dynamics and big brass chorales and counterpoint, and it's all such bullshit. It's ridiculous. There isn't a thing about his symphonies that does not betray a composer fully capable and actively using, imaginatively, the capabilities of the orchestra that he chose. I mean, his orchestration is absolutely perfect for what he wanted to do, and it's not because he's using these sections individually like organ stops. It's because the music wants to sound like that, and he understands the colors he needs and how to obtain them. And his music is terrible on the organ, principally because the organ has no rhythm as an instrument, and Bruckner is so dependent on rhythm to give these block-like musical modules that he's working with, to give them life, to give them energy, to give them contrast between stillness and motion. There's got to be rhythm. Now, Bruckner's rhythm tends to be fairly clunky, maybe, because it's not very fast. Usually it's just a dotted dump, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. He does that one. And then there's the 2 verses 3 meter that he's always doing, da 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 da, or da 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 da, something like that. He uses these things constantly, but he juxtaposes these rhythms and he layers them to create his musical textures. In the 6th Symphony, he does it in an extremely sophisticated way, where you've got triplets on top of duplets, and you've got it here. I mean, even Karajan of the Berlin Philharmonic at the recapitulation of the first movement got a little confused in keeping the rhythm clear. But on the organ, you hear none of it. It all just becomes a gigantic, swimmy chord. I mean, the end of the Eighth Symphony, where all the themes from all the other movements come back at this wonderful contrapuntal combination with the strings arpeggiating like crazy and tremolos above it. I mean, it's the most glorious sound in the world. On an organ, it just sounds like the guy's leaning on a C major chord. You just hear, it's horrid, unspeakably horrid. So Hansjörg Albrecht has to be included for possibly the most misconceived group of Bruckner performances that have ever existed in the history of humankind. Although Gerd Schaller also does Bruckner on the organ, and it is equally dreadful. And he's a fine Bruckner conductor. So what happens to these people's minds when faced with an organ I can't even begin to describe. But here we have the 5 worst Bruckner conductors, and easily the world's worst Bruckner organist. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.